This video is about the paradox of transsexual womanhood. And by that, I mean essentially, well, to start with answering the question, what is a transsexual woman? And then trying to explain the way that, in the one sense, a transsexual woman is going through a process. She is transitioning from being a male, being a female. And in another sense, that transition is not happening because she was already born as a female. And that can be quite confusing. It can be confusing both to someone who's come to realize that they are someone who is transsexual, and it can be confusing to their family, and it can be confusing to someone in the lay population who really doesn't know what's going on, doesn't understand how this relates to their church. Should they be compassionate? Should all transsexuals be burnt at the stake? How exactly should you react? What should you feel? Well, let's take a brief look. So, the first issue I'm going to focus on is what I refer to as parlance. And by parlance, I'm talking about the common vernacular. And by that, I mean the idea that a transsexual woman is in transition, as it's called, is the idea of going from being biologically male to being biologically female. That is a way of understanding, and it's a fairly traditional understanding. If you were to look at a documentary on the BBC, if you're British, then you might see the idea of a woman trapped in a man's body as being what transsexualism is about. You might see the idea, perhaps, you might see the idea that, as I posted on this YouTube channel, a person makes a conscious decision, and that person, such as myself, makes a decision at a point in time to transition from being male to being female, and then you start to wonder, well, can that barrier be crossed? Can you jump across the hurdle from male to female? And then it starts to feel problematic. And then many people who are, let's say, untrained, unskilled, they may feel that it's not possible to get across this barrier. Well, that's when I'll skirt out the ideas that basically you are already female as a transsexual woman. You're born this way, baby. You're born this way. Now, we'll start with genetics. Now, at birth, a transsexual woman has what's called an assigned gender. That is to say that maybe a doctor or midwife looks at a sonogram and announces, you have a baby boy. At physical birth, the child is physically inspected, and again the announcement is, you have a boy. Now, the problem with this is, how exactly do they know? Well, They've looked at a sonogram, which is basically a physical picture. You can metaphorically call it a photograph. And looking in more detail into that photograph, you've looked at what the physical body of the child looks like. Has that told you gender? It really hasn't. It's told you one perspective of gender, and that perspective on gender is a genital-focused picture. Now, one of the problems with the genital-focused interpretation of the meaning of the term gender is that being male is not all about testicles and penises. It's about a lot more than that. And some people have ambiguous genitalia. Some famous actresses from Hollywood, I shan't name names, but appear to have male genitalia. In a variety of cases, there is an intersex phenomenon, and male genitalia appear despite that person being female. Now, beyond this, we also have the issue that the notion of binary gender is an archaic construct. We take the view that the entire world fits neatly into the category male or female. Now, that's a very useful shorthand. You meet someone, you say, or you refer to someone, you say, are they male, are they female? The problem is, things are a bit more complex than that. So, for example, when we go beyond the physical, genital view of gender, we start to take a more sophisticated understanding. So we go into biology, we go into genetics. Genetically, we may take the idea that there are XX chromosome people and there are XY chromosome people, and that is all there are. And one we might call Eve and the other we might call Adam. And the problem with this understanding is, well, defining what gender is in genetic terms leads to the conclusion that there are more people in that gender, or what is a biological gender, also referred to as sex, than we ordinarily allow as being. So, triple X, genetic code, for example, women with triple X genetic code are often referred to as metafemales, and in that sense, they represent an additional biological sex. Genetically, they represent the idea that there are more than two genetic sexes. Now, we're just not used to that. We live in a two-box world, but both defining things in terms of genitals gives problems. Defining things genetically also gives problems. There is no such thing as an uncontroversial, uncontentious definition of gender. Now, let's give another way of looking at it. We could say, by Judith Butler, that gender is performative. So the idea of what you perform creates a gender that you are. Well, that still means that gender is a very fixed part of a person. We could go via Simone de Beauvoir, the argument that what a woman is something that is made They're not born. That biology and genetics, although they may exist, are not what is important about a woman. They're not what creates a woman. And so, for all these reasons, when a transsexual is born, they exhibit certain genetic characteristics. Now, genetically, transsexuals, contemporary research tells us, have transsexual genes. Males do not have transsexual genes. So in this sense, genetically, compared to the male population, transsexual women cross over into an entirely different category. They cross towards the female end of the spectrum. They go outside the male box. And to quote Lady Gaga, they were born that way. This isn't a choice. This is a matter of genetics. And to reiterate, although for the sake of convenience we speak about transitioning, we say that someone who is transsexual is uncomfortable with their assigned sex at birth, in a deeper analysis, we are also saying that that person was born in a gender in which they intend to transition to. It's a little confusing if you're not used to the idea. It's equally confusing if you are a transsexual. Now, like I say, you see on the BBC and you simply see the idea, yes, transsexual woman in a man's body, therefore that is the ontology, that is what a transsexual woman is. And the reality, the questioning of your own existence, it's deeper than that. It's much deeper. And transsexuals know at the same time that they are female, transsexual women. But they need to understand it within themselves, as well as being acknowledged by a community. So genetic code issues we've sketched. I think that might be all I'll cover at this time. So I've just given a brief sort of a sketch, and what the message has been is being transsexual, being a transsexual woman specifically, is more than it appears to be. I'll cover one final issue, I suppose. It's often wrongly understood by those, again, untrained minds, that somehow being a transsexual woman or being transsexual is some sort of psychiatric malfunction. The two texts I'll reference. The American DSM-V, or DSM Volume 5, is perhaps the leading reference manual come textbook of psychiatry in the world. And second to that is the WHO, the World Health Organization text. In both of those, they specifically mention that being transsexual is not a mental disorder. Instead, it's discomfort. It's very much like you have a tack on your seat for your entire life that you can't remove. So, in that sense, being transsexual is about removing that tack. It's about, what would I describe it as? It is about a need to transition, but you are transitioning your assigned gender. So in effect, you are transitioning from the gender you were chosen as at birth. You are transitioning from the gender that society chooses for you to your pre-existing gender. Now that's where the interesting issue comes in, the somewhat enigmatic, the somewhat paradoxical issue, that, as I put, you are transitioning to a gender that you already exist in. Now I think this is why a lot of transsexual women decide, well, I'm not going to transition, because once you understand that you began life as a woman, then you might not feel that you had to prove the point to anyone. So I've skirted a few issues, and I will get back to you. Thank you.